Hello everyone, welcome back to Unveiling Mythical Legends. Today we will explore the hero Heracles from ancient Greek mythology and follow him as he completes one challenging task after another. Are you ready to enter this world full of adventure and challenges? First, Heracles' first task is truly shocking. He must defeat the invincible Nemean Lion. This lion not only has impenetrable skin, but is also immune to any weapon's attack. How did Heracles overcome these obstacles and complete this impossible task? Come and find out. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any amazing stories. Be sure to share it with your friends and discuss these legendary heroes together. The first task, the Nemean Lion. Heracles' first task sounds like an impossible challenge. He must defeat the terrifying Nemean Lion. This lion not only possesses extraordinary strength, but its fur is also impervious to any mortal weapon, even the sharpest steel sword. The presence of the Nemean Lion had turned the land between Cleonae and Nemea barren, and no one dared to approach. The lion's threat had become a shadow over people's minds, and it wasn't until Heracles arrived that this long-standing reign of terror would come to an end. Without hesitation, Heracles set out for the Nemean forest, having heard that it was the lion's lair. As he entered the forest, his mind was focused on one thing: to defeat the monster, claim its fur, and complete his task. At first, Heracles tried using his bow and arrows, attempting to kill the fierce lion from a distance, but the arrows couldn't penetrate its thick hide. Faced with this, Heracles didn't become discouraged. Instead, he switched to using a club, hoping to subdue the beast with more direct force. A fierce close-quarters battle ensued, with their strength colliding like a thunderstorm, causing the entire forest to tremble from the intensity of their struggle. In the end, Heracles, using his incredible strength, managed to knock the lion to the ground. Despite the lion's massive size and powerful strength, it could not withstand Heracles' determination and might. While the lion was still recovering, Heracles seized its neck, applied all his strength, and strangled it to death in a single motion. At that moment, the Nemean Lion finally fell, and Heracles had won this life-and-death battle. However, this victory was not just about the death of a lion. Heracles used the lion's hide to create an impenetrable armor and fashioned its head into a new kind of helmet. This was not only a tribute to the lion's strength, but also a symbol of Heracles' own indomitable spirit in this task. Wearing this lion's hide armor, he returned to Eurystheus. When Eurystheus saw Heracles adorned in such formidable gear, he was filled with fear and immediately retreated into his palace, even ordering that Heracles should never appear before him again. However, Heracles did not back down. He continued to receive orders through the messenger Coprius, preparing for the next, even more difficult challenge ahead. The second task, the Hydra. Heracles' second task seemed like a journey into an even darker and more deadly world. He had to defeat the legendary Hydra. This terrifying giant serpent was the offspring of Typhon and Echidna, with 9 fearsome heads, one of which was immortal and would not die no matter how much it was struck. The monster had caused great havoc in the surrounding villages, especially to the local herds, often raiding them and bringing great suffering to the villagers. Heracles' task was clearly not a simple battle, but a deadly confrontation full of challenges. Heracles was not alone in this task. He set off with his nephew Iolaus, traveling by chariot to the swamp of Lerna, where the Hydra's lair was located. The swamp's mud and mist made their movements even more difficult, but Heracles did not hesitate. Using his arrows, he launched an attack on the Hydra. The arrows rained down on the massive serpent, eventually forcing it to leave its lair and retreat toward a nearby mountain forest. Heracles pursued relentlessly, charging forward and using his mighty club to strike at the Hydra's heads with intense force. But things were not as simple as they seemed. Every time Heracles destroyed one of the Hydra's heads, two more would instantly grow back. This made his attacks seem incredibly futile, and the Hydra's regenerative ability presented an unprecedented challenge for him. However, he did not give up. Instead, he began to think calmly about how to handle this dilemma. Just as Heracles and the Hydra were locked in a fierce battle, a giant crab suddenly appeared, biting at Heracles' feet, trying to distract him. Without hesitation, Heracles used his club to swat away this new foe and called for Iolaus' help. Following his uncle's command, Iolaus cleverly set fire to the nearby trees and used the burning branches to stretch toward the Hydra's necks. This way, whenever Heracles chopped off one of the serpent's heads, Iolaus could immediately use fire to cauterize the wound, preventing new heads from regenerating. In the end, Heracles successfully severed the immortal head and buried it by the roadside, placing a heavy stone on top to ensure it would never resurrect. As a final precaution, Heracles dipped his arrows in the Hydra's poisonous blood, making them exceptionally lethal. Any enemy struck by these arrows would never heal from their wounds, making Heracles' weapons even more terrifying. Third task, the Ceryneian Hind. Heracles' third task was very different from the intense battles of his previous quests, yet it was still filled with challenges. He had to capture a sacred, horned hind and bring it alive back to Mycenae. This hind was no ordinary deer, but a sacred animal of the goddess Artemis, possessing golden antlers and hooves as bright as bronze. It was incredibly graceful and had extraordinary speed and alertness, symbolizing the gods. Every movement of this hind represented divine and natural power. Thus, Heracles' task was not only a chase, but also a great test of his patience and wisdom. Heracles did not intend to harm the hind, nor did he want to offend the sacred animal of Artemis. Therefore, he began the long pursuit. This chase lasted for an entire year. Over this year, he traversed countless lands, crossed mountains and rivers, with unyielding determination and without a moment of rest. The hind's speed was unmatched, always managing to escape just when Heracles was about to close in. Yet, Heracles' resolve never wavered, as each pursuit seemed like a spiritual contest between him and the deer. Finally, by the banks of the river Ladon, Heracles cornered the hind. Although he did not want to harm the creature, he knew that without taking some drastic action, he would never be able to bring it back to Mycenae. Reluctantly, Heracles drew his bow and shot an arrow into the hind's leg, successfully immobilizing it. Although this was a regrettable act, Heracles felt deep sorrow, for it meant he had strayed from his original promise. With great care, he lifted the hind onto his shoulders and began the difficult journey back. However, Heracles' journey was not an easy one. While crossing Arcadia, he encountered Artemis and her brother, Phobos Apollo. When Artemis saw Heracles carrying her beloved hind, she became furious, accusing him of harming her sacred animal. To her, this was a great offense. Seeing her anger, Heracles immediately set the hind down and sincerely explained his actions. He conveyed that he had no intention of harming the deer, but had been forced to do so because of the unique nature of his task. Heracles' sincerity and wisdom eventually touched Artemis, and though reluctantly, the goddess calmed her anger and allowed him to take the hind alive back to Mycenae. Fourth task, the Erymanthian boar. The fourth task required Heracles to capture a highly dangerous Erymanthian boar and bring it back alive to Mycenae. This boar had caused immense destruction in the region of Erymanthus, wreaking havoc like an unstoppable disaster, destroying fields and terrorizing the locals. It had become a scourge, causing devastation wherever it went. Therefore, Heracles was ordered to capture the boar and bring peace to the region. During the pursuit, Heracles encountered a centaur named Pholus and asked for food and shelter. Pholus not only warmly welcomed him, but also prepared a lavish meal. Heracles, in a cheerful mood, sat down to enjoy the delicious dinner. However, during the meal, he noticed that there was no wine. When he inquired about it, Pholus explained that the wine cellar was a shared property of all the centaurs, and the wine barrels could only be opened when all the centaurs were present to share in the feast. Heracles, being a master of persuasion, used his patience and clever words to convince Pholus, and eventually, Pholus made an exception and opened the wine barrel for him. As the rich scent of wine spread throughout the forest, many centaurs came rushing to the scene. The centaurs, furious, arrived at Pholus' home with large stones and fir trees, trying to claim some of the wine for themselves. Heracles decided not to let the situation spiral out of control, so he used a torch to drive them away. After this chaos, he resumed tracking the boar and chased the centaurs all the way to Nemea, where they sought refuge in the cave of the kind old centaur Chiron. However, fate played a cruel joke on Heracles. While he was using poisoned arrows to shoot at the centaurs who were chasing him, one of the arrows accidentally struck Chiron, the centaur, in the knee. Heracles immediately recognized Chiron, who had once been his close friend in his youth, and was filled with immense sorrow and regret. Chiron's wound was poisoned by the venom of the Hydra, and no matter how hard Heracles tried to treat it with healing ointments, he could not save Chiron's life. This immortal centaur was doomed to unbearable pain. In the end, at Heracles' plea, the gods decided to allow Chiron to end his suffering by allowing him to die. Heracles' grief did not stop there. When he discovered that Pholus had also died due to an unfortunate incident with an arrow, his heart became even heavier. This arrow had originally been taken from a dead centaur, and Heracles never imagined that such an insignificant arrow could cause such a deadly outcome. He was deeply saddened by the deaths of both centaurs and, according to tradition, buried Pholus. Then, he continued on his path to capture the boar. In the end, Heracles used his mighty voice and a thunderous shout to drive the terrifying boar out of the thicket and forced it into the deep snow at the mountain's peak. After countless chases and intense confrontations, the boar was finally exhausted, and Heracles successfully subdued it. He bound the boar with ropes and brought it back alive to Mycenae. The fifth labor, cleaning the stables of Augeas. The fifth labor seemed simple, but it was actually a challenge requiring creativity and intelligence. Heracles had to clean the stables of Augeas in a single day. Augeas was the king of Elis, and his stables housed 3,000 cattle. However, due to years of neglect, the stables were filled with an enormous amount of waste and filth, with a stench so overwhelming that the situation was unbearable. The difficulty of the task for Heracles did not lie in strength, but in finding the most efficient way to complete it. Heracles approached Augeas and proposed a deal. If he could clean the stables within a day, he would be rewarded with 1/10 of the cattle. Augeas laughed at this offer, believing that such a feat was impossible to accomplish. He even accepted Heracles' challenge in front of his son, Phyleus, confident that there was no way the task could be completed. However, to his surprise, Heracles did not rely on traditional manual labor, but instead came up with a highly clever solution. Near the palace, there were 2 rivers, the Peneus River and the Alpheus River. Heracles immediately had an idea. Since the waste in the stables was so thick and stubborn, he could use the power of nature to wash it away. He began digging channels, cleverly diverting the waters of both rivers into the stables. As the water flowed in, its force quickly washed away the accumulated filth, and the mud and debris were swept away with the current. This solution was not only fast and effective, but also greatly reduced the amount of manual labor required. Using his wisdom and ingenuity, Heracles turned what seemed like an impossible task into a reality. However, when Augeas learned that this labor had been assigned by Eurystheus, he reneged on his promise. He refused to honor the original deal and denied Heracles the reward of 1/10 of the cattle. Heracles did not give up. He decided to take the matter to court and sued Augeas. He called upon Augeas' son, Phyleus, to serve as a fair witness and testify to Heracles' efforts and success in completing the task. The sixth labor: drive away the Stymphalian birds. Heracles' sixth labor was unlike the previous ones, where he faced beasts or monsters directly. Instead, he had to deal with a terrifying flock of birds, the Stymphalian birds. These birds were known for their massive size and incredible offensive power. Their wings were covered with feathers as sharp as arrows, which they could shoot at any enemy, causing devastating damage. The Stymphalian birds resided near Lake Stymphalus in Arcadia, and their flocks brought endless disaster to the local people and livestock, becoming a major pest in the region. Heracles was tasked with driving them away, so the people could once again live in peace. When Heracles approached Lake Stymphalus, he was immediately struck by the sight before him. The sky around the lake was filled with the enormous flock of birds, their numbers almost unbelievable. Their wings shimmered with sharp feathers, and the local residents had long been terrified of them. Heracles knew that physical strength alone wouldn't be enough to directly confront such a powerful enemy, so he began to hesitate, pondering how he might find a way to overcome this challenge. As he was lost in thought, Heracles suddenly felt a gentle hand placed on his shoulder. He quickly turned around, surprised to find the goddess Pallas Athena standing behind him. Athena, with her dignified presence, handed Heracles a pair of massive bronze shields forged by Hephaestus. Under the goddess's guidance, these shields would become the key weapon for Heracles in this labor. Following Athena's instructions, Heracles climbed to the top of a nearby hill and began to violently shake the bronze shields. The enormous clang of the shields sent a deafening, sharp noise that echoed throughout the lakeside. To the Stymphalian birds, this sound was nothing less than an intense provocation, making them feel deeply uneasy and frightened. The birds were startled by the sudden noise and took flight in a frenzy, attempting to flee from this deadly threat. Without hesitation, Heracles quickly drew his bow, aimed at the flock of birds in the air. His arrows flew like messengers of death, one after another, precisely striking many of the fleeing birds. Those that failed to dodge the arrows fell one by one, becoming part of Heracles' victory. The birds that managed to escape the arrows never dared to return to the lake, flying far away and never appearing again. And so, today's story ends here. The courage and wisdom of Heracles in facing the Nemean lion are truly remarkable. Not only did he defeat the lion, but he also fashioned its skin into an impenetrable armor, becoming a symbol of his indomitable spirit. This was just the beginning. Many more challenges awaited him. If you enjoy these stories, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on the exciting adventures of Heracles to come. Leave a comment telling us which of Heracles' tasks is your favorite, and share these stories with your friends to let more people learn about this great hero from ancient Greece. See you in the next episode, and have a wonderful day.